Danladi thought the hard part was stealing the casket. He was wrong. The hard part was surviving what came after. Welcome to Tales at Dusk, the archive of rich African tales. Danladi used to think poverty had a smell. Not the smell of sweat or dirty clothes. No, this one was different. It was the smell of waking up every day with a heavy mind, counting money that was not enough, and still forcing yourself to smile. That was Danladi's life, even though he worked for a billionaire. Every morning, he drove a shining black SUV out of a mansion in Maitama, Abuja. The house was so big that some parts always looked quiet, as if nobody lived there. The gate had 2 security men. The compound had cameras. The flowers were trimmed like they had a salary. Danladi wore a clean shirt, black trousers, and polished shoes. From outside, anybody would think he had made it. Some people even greeted him with respect, the kind you only get when they believe you are close to power. But when Danladi got home, respect did not follow him. His room was small. His rent always threatened him. His phone beeped with messages he did not want to open. Danladi, are you there? Please, we need money for food. Brother, help me with something small. It was always something small that kept becoming something big. Danladi did not hate work. He hated the feeling of being trapped. He hated watching wealth every day and still begging at the end of the month. Still, he stayed. Not because he loved the billionaire-like family. He stayed because he believed something. If destiny refused to hand him money, he would at least stand near it. The old billionaire was called Alhaji Mukhtar. He was quiet, always dressed in simple white, and smelled of expensive perfume that never shouted. When he spoke, people listened. When he walked, the house became careful. Danladi drove him to meetings, to private visits, to places with gas and clean silence. Inside the car, Danladi often studied his boss in the rear mirror. The old man looked like someone who had finished fighting life, and Danladi looked like someone still fighting it with bare hands. One evening, as Danladi opened the car door for him, the old man paused and stared at him for a moment. "You are a good driver," Alhaji Mukhtar said. Danladi nodded. "Thank you, sir." The old man's eyes stayed on him, like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He only walked into the house slowly, with the tired steps of someone carrying years. Danladi watched him disappear into the mansion. Then he looked at his own hands. Strong hands, working hands, empty hands. And as he drove out of Maitama that night, a thought sat quietly in his chest, like a small stone. How long will I keep touching wealth without holding any of it? Danladi's problem was not that he didn't work hard. His problem was that hard work did not respect him. His salary came like rain in Harmattan, too small and too late. The rich house he served ran on generators, security, and quiet comfort. But Danladi's own life ran on prayer, borrowing, and managing shame. That night, he got home and found his landlord waiting outside, sitting like a punishment. "Danladi," the man called, dragging the name. "You are owing me." I know, sir. I'm trying," Danladi said. The landlord laughed without joy. "You people are always trying. Trying doesn't pay rent." Danladi begged for 2 more weeks. His throat tasted like bitter leaf as he spoke. The landlord finally stood and left, warning him the next visit would not be talk. Inside his room, Danladi sat on the edge of his mattress and removed his shoes. His feet hurt, but his mind hurt more. His phone buzzed again. A message from his younger sister. "Brother, mommy said the drugs are finished." Another one from a friend. "Guy, you still get that small money you promised?" Danladi stared at the screen until it dimmed. He wanted to throw the phone away. But phones were a luxury too. Everything in his life felt like it could be taken from him at any time. He lay down, but sleep refused to come. In his head, he saw the billionaire's compound again. The shining gates, the quiet walls, the way food always smelled good there, the way visitors entered with confidence, not fear. Danladi had watched drivers like him in Maitama. Some of them had built houses, some had opened businesses, some had even started dressing like small politicians. How? He asked himself that question many times. He never got an answer. By morning, he was back in uniform, back in the billionaire's compound, back to smiling like a man without trouble. He washed the car. He checked the tires. He opened and closed doors like he was guarding someone else's comfort with his life. As he walked, he noticed something. The compound workers spoke in low voices. The security men looked tense. One of the maids wiped her eyes as she walked past. Something was wrong. When Danladi asked, one of the older security men only shook his head. "Driver," the man said quietly, "pray for your ogre." Danladi's stomach tightened. He looked at the mansion, at the curtains still drawn even though it was bright outside. For the first time since he started working there, Danladi felt fear for the old man. Not because they were close, but because if the billionaire fell, Danladi would fall too. And as he stood by the car, waiting for instructions that never came, another thought rose inside him, sharper than the one from last night. If this job ends, what exactly will be left of me? The call came around midday. Danladi was wiping the dashboard when the head of security walked up fast, his face tight like someone holding bad news inside his mouth. "Driver," he said, "park the car well. Nobody is going out again today." Danladi straightened. "Why, sir?" The man didn't answer immediately. He looked around first, as if the walls could hear. Then he spoke in a lower voice. "Alhaji is gone." For a second, Danladi did not understand. The words entered his ears but refused to enter his mind. "Gone, as in?" The head of security held his gaze. "He died this morning." Danladi's hand went cold on the cloth. He stared at the mansion, expecting the old man to appear and prove it was a lie. But the house stayed quiet. Then the compound changed like someone flipped a switch. Cars started arriving, black SUVs. Men in white kaftans, women with headscarves and soft crying voices. A few people hugged each other in the driveway, shaking their heads as if the world had made a mistake. Danladi stood near the gates, watching them enter. He felt a strange mix of emotions. There was shock, yes. The old man was not young, but death still felt sudden. There was also pity, because whatever a person owns, they still end up under the ground like everyone else. But the strongest feeling in Danladi's chest was fear. Not fear of death, fear of hunger. He imagined the family sitting inside, sharing properties, sharing accounts, sharing power. And he imagined himself outside, forgotten like an old tire. A maid walked past him, crying openly. Danladi wanted to ask questions, but he held back. In rich houses, too many questions could make you look suspicious or desperate. By evening, the whole compound smelled of incense, perfume, and sorrow. The living room became a meeting place. Men spoke in low tones, mentioning burial arrangements, security, important guests, and protocol. Danladi noticed something else too. Nobody spoke to him directly anymore. Before, people used to say, "Driver, get the car ready," or "Driver, take this message." Now, they just walked past him, as if the billionaire's death had erased his name too. He went to the garage and sat inside the car, alone. He rested his head on the steering wheel and closed his eyes. This was the man whose wealth he had watched every day. This was the man whose life had kept his own life balanced, even if barely. Danladi opened his eyes and looked at the back seat, the place where Alhaji Mukhtar used to sit quietly, like a king who didn't need to talk. For a moment, Danladi remembered the old man's words. "You are a good driver." At the time, it sounded like a simple compliment. Now, it sounded like a goodbye. Outside, a woman's voice rose in loud mourning, and the compound answered with more crying. Danladi inhaled slowly. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing. From this moment, nothing in his life would be stable again. Preparations for the burial began immediately. In the billionaire's house, death did not slow anything down. It only changed the subject of conversation. Meetings continued. Phones rang without rest. People spoke about flights, guests, security, and standards. Danladi moved around like a shadow, doing what he was told, listening more than he spoke. That was how he heard it. Two men stood near the corridor, speaking carelessly, thinking nobody important was close. The casket alone is almost 80 million, one of them said. Danladi froze. Which one? The other asked. The imported one, gold fittings, special lining. The family said it must match his status. Danladi's ears began to ring. 80 million. The number entered him like sickness. He walked away slowly, afraid his legs would betray him. He returned to the garage and sat down, breathing hard, as if he had run a race. 80 million. That money could clear his rent. It could pay his mother's hospital bills. It could open a business. It could erase years of begging in one move. And it was going into the ground. Danladi told himself to forget it. But the thought refused to leave. That night, sleep avoided him again. He lay on his mattress, staring at the ceiling, hearing the number echo in his head. Why bury wealth? The man was already dead. He would not feel comfort. He would not admire gold. Danladi turned on his side and squeezed his eyes shut. But another voice answered him from inside. If you had even half of that money, your life would change. The burial day came with heavy rain and heavy traffic. Danladi drove family members, visitors, and important people. Everywhere he went, people spoke about how befitting the burial would be. When he finally saw the casket, his breath caught. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. Polished wood, gold edges, soft interior. It looked more like a bed than a coffin. A bed worth more than his entire life. As men lowered it into the ground, Danladi's hands trembled. Something broke quietly inside him. That night, as he lay awake again, a dark thought settled fully in his mind, no longer shy. What if I take it? The thought scared him. He sat up suddenly, sweating. No, that was madness. But the thought stayed. He imagined digging at night. He imagined selling it quietly. He imagined waking up without fear for the first time in his life. By morning, the thought had changed shape. It was no longer a question. It was becoming a plan. Now that the burial was over, the compound felt different. The visitors had reduced. The morning was quieter. The family was still around, but they no longer moved like people in shock. They moved like people returning to business. Danladi noticed things he had never cared about before. He noticed that the security men changed shifts at exact times. He noticed how some cameras had blind spots near the back fence. He noticed that the grave was not too far from the small garden behind the guest house. He told himself he was only observing, but he was lying to himself. One evening, he followed two gardeners and listened as they talked. This place will soon be empty, one of them said. Once the family travels, only security will remain. Danladi stored the words like fuel. Still, a part of him kept fighting back. He would remember the old billionaire's quiet face, the way the man spoke gently, the way he once said, "You are a good driver." Then guilt would press his chest. But poverty always returned with a louder voice. His mother's medication still needed money. His landlord still wanted rent. His younger brother still needed school fees. One night, his sister called crying. "Brother, mommy is not sleeping. She said her body is paining her." Danladi held the phone and felt something hard in him tighten. After the call, he sat for a long time, staring at the wall. Then he stood up and made a decision that surprised even him. If the world refused to be fair, he would take his own fairness. He borrowed a friend's old motorcycle and rode out of town, away from the clean streets of Maitama, away from CCTV and security gates. He went to a place he had heard about but never wanted to visit, a place where desperate people went when normal life refused to help them. A native doctor's house. The road was dark and lonely. The air felt heavy. Even the night seemed to watch him. As Danladi rode deeper into that part of town, his heart beat fast. He was not just planning theft anymore. He was inviting something he did not understand. And somewhere inside him, a small voice whispered, "Once you enter this road, you may not return the same The native doctor's place was hidden behind an old fence and tall trees. No signboard, no light, just a small compound that smelled of smoke and bitter herbs. Danladi parked and hesitated. For the first time since the burial, fear rose above hunger. He almost turned back, but then he remembered the casket, the money, his mother's voice on the phone, his landlord's laughter. He stepped inside. A young boy led him into a dark room lit by one weak lantern. The shadows on the wall moved like they were alive. On a wooden shelf were bottles, feathers, and small bags tied with red thread. The native doctor sat on the floor, calm and old, with eyes that looked like they had seen too much. He didn't ask Danladi to sit. He only said, "You have blood on your mind." Danladi swallowed. "No, Baba." The old man stared at him. "You came because you want to do something that people must not see." Danladi's mouth went dry. He tried to act strong, but his voice betrayed him. "I need help," he said quietly. "Something to make people sleep. Deep sleep." The native doctor's eyes narrowed. "Sleep is close to death. You want to borrow death's language." Danladi forced a laugh. "It's not that kind of thing." The old man leaned forward. "You don't have to explain. Your spirit already did." Silence filled the room. Danladi felt exposed, like his skin was thin. Then the native doctor stood and walked to the shelf. He brought down a small object, wrapped in black cloth. He opened it slowly. Inside was a short nail, dark and rusted, tied with a string and coated with something that looked like dried oil. "This is what you want," the man said. "A sleep pin." Danladi's eyes stayed on it. "How does it work?" "You will pin it in the ground inside that compound," the old man said. "When you speak the word I will give you, the air will become heavy. Eyes will close. Even strong men will sleep like babies." Danladi's heart raced. "For how long?" "Long enough," the old man answered. "But listen well." Danladi leaned closer. The native doctor's voice dropped. "Some birds don't forgive. Some dead men don't stay dead when you disturb their rest." Danladi swallowed hard. "I understand." But he didn't. He paid the man quickly. As he turned to leave, the native doctor added one last sentence, slow and clear. "If you sell a man's bed, don't be surprised when he comes looking for yours." Danladi laughed weakly, pretending it was only talk. Yet, as he rode back into the night with the charm hidden in his pocket, he could not shake the feeling that something had followed him out of that room. Danladi waited 3 days. Not because he was changing his mind, but because he wanted the compound to relax. He wanted everyone to return to normal. He wanted guards to get lazy again. He watched everything like a man studying an exam. He noticed when the gate was busiest. He noticed that by 2 a.m., the compound always became quiet, the kind of quiet that made even dogs tired. On the 4th night, rain started falling gently, like the sky was trying to help him hide his sins. Danladi parked the billionaire's car where it always stayed and walked with careful steps, acting normal. Nobody suspected him. To them, he was just the driver, still hanging around because he had nowhere else to go. At exactly 1:47 a.m., he moved. His hands shook as he brought out the charm. The small rusted nail felt heavier than it should. He walked behind the guest house and found a spot close to the garden, where the cameras didn't see clearly. He knelt. His mouth was dry. His throat felt tight. Then he pushed the nail into the ground. The moment it entered the earth, Danladi felt the air change. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like when power goes off and the fan stops. The compound did not make a sound, but everything felt muted. Danladi whispered the word the native doctor gave him. At first, nothing happened. Then, one by one, lights inside the house went off. The security men, who usually paced at night, stopped moving. Danladi watched one of them stand near the gate, blink slowly, and sit down like a tired child. In seconds, the man's head dropped, deep sleep. Danladi's heart pounded so loud he feared it would wake them. He picked up his shovel and headed for the grave. The rain increased slightly. It covered the sound of his footsteps, covered the sound of his breathing. It even covered the sound of his fear. When he reached the burial place behind the compound, he stared at the mound of earth. He paused. This was the moment he could still turn back. But the image of his mother's pain and his landlord's threats pushed him forward. He dug. Soil filled his nails. Mud splashed his trousers. His arms ached. His back hurt. But he kept digging like a man digging his own future out of the ground. Finally, the casket appeared. Even in darkness, it looked expensive. Danladi's breath caught. He wiped sweat and rain from his face and pulled it out with shaking hands. Then he did something that made his stomach twist. He opened it. The billionaire's body lay there, still dressed, still calm, still looking like a man who did not know what was happening to him. Danladi shut the lid quickly. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. He dragged the body out, lowered it into the bare grave, and covered it fast. No coffin, no honor, just earth. Then he cleaned the area carefully, smoothing the soil, removing footprints, erasing signs like a criminal with a conscience. Before dawn, Danladi left the compound with the casket hidden in a covered vehicle. As the first morning call to prayer rose in the distance, Danladi smiled for the first time in weeks. He believed his suffering was over. He didn't know his real suffering was just beginning. Selling the casket was easier than Danladi expected. That scared him. He thought he would struggle, that questions would be asked, that police would appear from nowhere. But the world was full of people who knew how to buy stolen things quietly, especially expensive things. He met the buyer through a middleman. They spoke in short sentences, like men discussing a shameful secret. No names, no long greetings, no phone calls that could be traced. The buyer inspected the casket with a torchlight, nodded once, and named a price that made Danladi's knees weak. When the money entered Danladi's account through careful transfers and cash drops, he sat alone in his room and stared at it. It was real. He had done it. He expected happiness to fill his chest. He expected to breathe easily. He expected to start planning his new life. But something strange happened. He couldn't touch the money. Not yet. Each time he opened his banking app, his chest tightened. Each time he imagined spending it, his mind showed him the grave he had disturbed. So Danladi told himself, let the dust settle first. He would wait. He would act normal. Then he would enjoy. That night, he slept for the first time in days. And that was when the nightmare started. In the dream, Danladi was back in the billionaire's compound. The night was darker than normal. The air was cold, like the inside of a deep freezer. He heard footsteps behind him, slow, heavy. He turned. Alhaji Mukhtar stood there, not like a dead man, like a man who had been offended. His clothes were stained with soil. His face looked calm, but his eyes were not eyes. They were deep, empty holes, like the grave itself had taken his sight. Danladi tried to speak, but his voice failed. The billionaire stretched out his hand. Danladi ran, but his legs moved like they were tied. He stumbled and fell. The old man walked closer, not rushing, not angry, just sure. Then he spoke. "You sold my bed," he said, his voice low and dry. "Now I'll have yours." Danladi tried to scream. He woke up. His body was cold with sweat, and he wasn't in his room. He was lying on bare ground. He sat up quickly and looked around. Market stalls, empty tables, a stray dog sniffing the dirt, the sky still dark, with only early morning lights trying to rise. Danladi's heart almost jumped out of his chest. "How did I get here?" he whispered. He stood, shaking, and ran home. When he got to his room, the door was locked from inside. He forced it open and found his mattress exactly as he left it. He didn't understand, but he forced himself to calm down. Maybe he sleepwalked. Maybe stress was doing something to his brain. He washed his face and tried to laugh. If waking up in the market is the only punishment, he said aloud, I can manage it. But deep inside, something replied quietly, this is only the beginning. After the first market morning, Danladi tried to live like nothing happened. He told himself it was stress, guilt, too much thinking, anything but a ghost. But the dream returned the next night. Same compound, same cold air, same heavy footsteps behind him. He ran again. He fell again. And again the voice came, dry and calm. You sold my bed, now I'll have yours. Danladi woke up coughing, his mouth full of dust. This time, he wasn't in the market. He was in a bush. Tall grass scratched his skin. Ants crawled on his leg. The air smelled of wet leaves and hidden animals. When he stood up, his knees sank into soft mud. He looked around, panicking. There was no road, no house, only darkness and trees. Danladi ran until he saw a small path and followed it until he reached a main road. He entered a keke and went home shaking, praying silently. That was when fear entered his life like a landlord. He stopped sleeping deeply. He started drinking coffee at night. He kept lights on. He would sit and watch the wall, waiting for morning like a prisoner waiting for release. Still, sleep always won. And each time sleep won, the billionaire came. Sometimes Danladi woke up behind a public toilet, covered in flies. Sometimes he woke near a refuse dump with rats moving close. People began to notice changes. His face became thinner. His eyes sank. He started shouting in his sleep. Neighbors complained. Friends avoided him. Danladi wanted to spend the money, but he couldn't. He was too afraid to enjoy anything. He felt like the money was cursed, like it had a smell that spirits could follow. He went back to the native doctor, but the man refused to help him. I warned you, the old man said. You stole sleep. Now sleep is stealing you. Danladi begged. The native doctor shook his head. Go and return what you took, he said, or your waking place will soon be your last. That sentence followed Danladi like a shadow. 2 nights later, Danladi slept again. The billionaire chased him again. Danladi fell again. You sold my bed, the voice began. Danladi woke up suddenly, gasping. He heard loud horns. He smelled exhaust fumes. He sat up and saw headlights rushing past him. He was at the edge of an express road. One wrong roll, one small movement, 1 second of sleep, and he would be dead. Danladi stared at the fast cars and began to cry like a child. That was when he finally accepted the truth. Death was calling his name, and the ghost was guiding him closer, one sleep at a time. Danladi did not wait for morning. He stood up from that express road like a man escaping a grave. His whole body shook. He didn't even dust his clothes. He only ran, entered the first keke he saw, and kept shouting, Maitama, Maitama. When he reached the Billionaire street, the gate security almost blocked him. Stop there, one guard barked. Who are you? Danladi raised his hands. I'm the former driver. Please, I must see the family. Please, before it is too late. They tried to push him away, but Danladi dropped to his knees right there on the tarred road. I stole it, he shouted. I stole the casket. Silence hit the gate. The guards froze. One of them ran inside. Minutes later, Danladi was dragged into the sitting room. The family members stared at him like he was a madman. Some were angry, some looked afraid. One woman started crying. Danladi did not defend himself. He only spoke fast, voice breaking. I dug it up. I sold it. I reburied him without it. Since then, I don't sleep like a human being again. He comes for me. He moves me. I woke up in market, bush, cemetery. Today, I woke beside express. Next one is death. His words fell heavy in the room. An elderly uncle stood up slowly. Where is the money? Danladi nodded quickly. I brought everything, complete. I never spent 1 kobo. He handed over the proof, the cash, the transfers, everything. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Then the uncle spoke. You have disgraced yourself, but you have saved your life by confessing. They forgave him, but not with warmth. It was the kind of forgiveness that comes with fear. Return to your life, the uncle warned, and never come near this house again. Danladi left as the sun began to rise. That night, he slept with his light on, trembling. He dreamed of Alhaji Mukta one last time. The old man stood far away, looking at him. Then he spoke softly, like wind through dry leaves. "You return my bed," he said, "so keep yours." Danladi woke up in his room. For the first time in weeks, he did not smell dust or death. But when he looked at his mattress, his blood turned cold. On the bedsheet, pressed deep like a hand had sat there all night, was the shape of someone else. Poverty is painful, but greed is more dangerous. Danladi didn't steal because he loved evil. He stole because he was tired of struggling. But once he crossed that line, the money stopped being a blessing and became a burden. The story reminds us that peace is worth more than quick wealth. When you take what is not yours, you may gain cash, but you can lose sleep, dignity, and even your life. And sometimes, the real punishment is not jail, it is living every day in fear. If you were Danladi, would you confess and return the money, or would you try to fight the haunting and keep it? If this story gave you chills, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode of Tales at Dusk. Also, drop your answer in the comments and share this story with someone who loves spooky Nigerian tales.